In Brazil, the justice system condemned the U.S. company Cargill for child slave labor. In Russia, the foreign ministry reported that the UK special services were involved in the massacre in Bucha. And Iran successfully launched Noor 3 into orbit, the first satellite entirely made in the country. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the TeleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Argentina, authorities in Buenos Aires recognized 18 indigenous communities that were granted legal status. The Provincial Council of Indigenous Affairs of the Undersecretary of Human Rights of the province of Buenos Aires indicated that the purpose of the ceremony is to make visible the struggle and work of indigenous peoples. The measure provides the possibility for the state to recognize the demands of the indigenous communities, in addition to advancing the different projects that they have. The initiative corresponds to the state of Buenos Aires, where at least 500,000 people who identify themselves as indigenous live. The Brazilian justice system condemned the U.S. company Cargill for child slave labor. The 39th Labor Court of the state of Bahia, responsible in the first instance, states that there were practices of slave labor and child exploitation in the cocoa farms. The irregularities occurred in the states of Bahia and Para, where the multinational buys directly and indirectly raw material to produce chocolates and cocoa butter. Cargill must pay a fine of more than 114,000 euros for collective moral damages. In addition to paying the fine, the company must adopt a series of measures to establish ethical relations in the production chain, including the formalization of labor contracts with all cocoa producers and suppliers. Last year, a federal judge in the United States dismissed a similar claim from Mali and Ivory Coast. In Peru, President Dina Boluarte will appear on September 27 before the public prosecutor's office that is investigating her alleged responsibility for the death of civilians during protests against her government. This will be the second time that the head of state appears in a hearing of this investigation. The first one took place on June 6, when Boluarte answered some questions from the public prosecutor's office, although she remained in silence before the questions of the Attorney General's office and the victims' defense lawyers. The investigation seeks to hold Boluarte accountable for the death of civilians during the anti-government and anti-Congress demonstrations that took place between December 2022 and February 2023. The protests demanded the resignation of Boluarte and the current Congress and the holding of general elections. With an electronic signature from the United States, the President of Ecuador, Guillermo Lasso, renewed the state of emergency in prisons for another 30 days. On September 21st, Decree 878 was issued, certifying the extension of a measure. However, it was only on Tuesday that the Secretary of Communication of the Presidency made it public. According to the text, the executive justifies the measure due to the conditions that led to the decision in July remaining unchanged. The decree indicates that it will remain in effect until October 20th. Ecuador is currently experiencing an unprecedented wave of violence both inside and outside prisons, resulting in 3,500 violent deaths as the end of August. In Ecuador, also, the National Union of Educators, Pensioners, Associations, and Workers hold a rally in front of the Constitutional Court to reject the public finance law. The union said that the decree law presented by President Guillermo Lasso seeks to cut the education and health budgets. In addition, the Union of Teachers indicated that the law would eliminate the state's obligation to pay 40% of their resources to the Ecuadorian Social Security Institute. On Tuesday, the Constitutional Court will hold a public hearing to consider the arguments of both representatives of the Lasso administration and civil society on the law. And Trinidad and Tobago has been in the oil sector for more than 100 years with a cumulative production of over 3 billion barrels of oil. In an interview given to TeleSUR on Tuesday, the General Director of Energy Chamber, Dax Driver, provided us with details about the importance of oil production for his country.
We use natural gas in our electricity sector. 100% of our electricity comes from natural gas, which has given us a very stable and competitive electricity utility as well, which I think is a big benefit for the country.
The Director General of the Trinidad and Tobago Energy Chamber also spoke of the benefits that gas revenues have brought to the country's GDP and their impact on essential sectors such as education, health, and social welfare.
Well, so our gas industry obviously creates a lot of revenue for the government. It creates it produces well-paying jobs as well. So Trinidad has a low unemployment rate, under 5%. I think it's one of the lowest in the region. We have a small population, only 1.2 million people, and a pretty high GDP per capita, which the sector has really given us, with about $18,000 per capita is our GDP. We have good access to electricity, 100% access to electricity, good access to LPG, cooking gas for all households at pretty cheap prices. We have free health services. We've invested a lot in education. There's free education right the way through secondary school, and subsidized education, free means-tested education in 2 good universities, and we have a lot of technical schools as well. So that's given us a sort of a very well-educated population and a lot of trained employees in the energy sector.
Canada's Speaker of the House of Commons, Anthony Rotad, announced on Tuesday that he will be resigning from his position following the scandal around the invitation and recognition of Ukrainian Nazi veteran Yaroslav Hunka. Hunka, a 98-year-old Ukrainian Nazi veteran who fought in the ranks of the 14th Waffen Grenadier Division of the Nazi SS during World War II, was given a standing ovation by the entire Canadian legislature on Friday. The recognition of Hunka came as the Speaker of the House of Commons, Anthony Rotad, delivered opening remarks before Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's address to the Canadian Parliament. On Sunday, Rotad apologized for his decision to invite Hunka. Trudeau's office said it was unaware of the invitation to Hunka. Rotad reiterated his regret over the invitation and recognition of Hunka, a decision that caused pain to Jewish communities and survivors of Nazi atrocities in Poland, among other countries.
It's with a heavy heart that I rise to inform members of my resignation as Speaker of the House of Commons. I reiterate my profound regret for my error in recognizing an individual in the House during the joint address to Parliament of President Zelensky. That public recognition has caused pain to individuals and communities, including the Jewish community in Canada and around the world, in addition to survivors of Nazi atrocities in Poland, among other nations. I accept full responsibility for my actions.
Let's now take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Full stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the south. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said on Wednesday that the UK special services were involved in the massacre in Bucha. London would have been part of the staging of events organized in March 2022 to frame Russia for an alleged massacre. The Foreign Ministry accuses the United Nations organization of not cooperating enough in the investigation of the event. Minister Sergei Lavrov has asked Secretary Guterres to intervene to identify the alleged victims without success. The spokeswoman also says that during its presidency of the UN Security Council, the United Kingdom blocked all attempts to investigate the events in Bucha. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu revealed at a meeting of ministry officials on Tuesday that Ukraine has lost more than 17,000 soldiers so far this month. Shoigu claimed that the Ukrainian military continues to suffer heavy losses almost 4 months into its much-hyped counter-offensive. The minister added that Ukraine has also parted with more than 2,700 pieces of military equipment over the same period. According to Shoigu, Ukrainian forces have still failed to achieve any major successes on the battlefield despite the heavy losses. Kiev launched its counter-offensive in early June, but according to Moscow, it has failed to make any tangible gains since it began. In early September, Shoigu said that Ukraine had lost more than 66,000 troops and over 7,600 pieces of heavy equipment since the start of the operation. The new update brings these figures to 83,000 and 10,300 respectively.
The United States and its allies continue to provide weapons to the Ukrainian armed forces, and the Kiev regime throws untrained soldiers into senseless assaults to slaughter. Such cynical actions of the West and their minions in Kiev only push Ukraine towards self-destruction. Under these conditions, we continue to increase the combat power of the armed forces, including the supply of modern weapons and improving the training of troops. Taking into account the experience of the special military operation, consistent implementation of the action plan until 2025 will make it possible to achieve the intended goals.
In Spain, voting began in the 17th investiture debate. Far-right candidate Alberto Núñez relies on chance. The current leader of the Popular Party could only win if a lawmaker makes a mistake when voting or breaks the discipline of the party. During the debate that took place this Wednesday morning, there have been hard crosses such as the one between the aspirant to the presidency of the government and the spokeswoman of Bildu, Merce Aispura, who has given him a resounding no, assuring that he will never be invested as leader of the opposition. During her intervention, the spokeswoman of the Popular Party, Cuca Gamarra, rejected the use of official languages and reiterated that in democracy, those who win govern. The 78th debate of the United Nations General Assembly came to an end in New York after a week in which world leaders gathered to discuss possible solutions to global challenges such as peace, security, and sustainable development. Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohamed gave a press conference to take stock of the outcome of the event. Said the meeting was well attended by world leaders, but expressed disappointment that U.S. President Joe Biden was the only head of state of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council to attend.
I think the response to only having 1 out of the 5 was disappointing, and certainly we might have had more commitments that would have been tangible had they been here on many of the SDG, but also the more general agenda that was discussed at the debate. However, having said that, 88 heads of state and government came, and there were commitments made. There was also conversations that were had that will carry some of this agenda forward. It is not always that we will get the answers to the problems we have here, but without that interaction and without those leaders speaking with each other, it makes it very difficult. There was a strong Africa voice. I mean, we saw that in the headlines that came back, that this was about partnerships. This was not about being left behind or demands made that where commitments were not met. And I think that we really saw that move.
The Deputy Secretary General also expressed the UN's hope and growing optimism to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda.
What have we achieved? Well, first, I think it was right up until the last moment, a high-level commitment for member states in the political declaration for the SDGs. It was very clear there that they supported one of the initiatives that the SG has put down to look at financing on the SDG stimulus. But it was also reaffirmation of the goals and their relevance as a framing for us to get sustainable development and meet the 2030 agenda. For the SDG part of this, it was a summit of hope. I think that we have still managed to give that to the many out there and to message that. We've got 7 years to get the SDGs. We did say all the way through this that, you know, this is done in the second half. Many quoted that, and many have come back to us to say next steps, and many, of course, are already continuing with that as they go back.
She also referred to the main obstacles faced to achieve the objectives set by the summit.
Our barriers to getting to the SDGs have been the means of implementation, finance, technology, trade, but those 6 transitions for us were important as they looked at energy and food systems, the digital piece, but also the climate, the triple climate crisis that we have.
Addressing the annual event to commemorate the International Day for the Total Elimination of Nuclear Weapons, which has been celebrated every year since 2014, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres expressed that the only way to prevent the use of nuclear weapons is to eliminate them, highlighting the consequences of a possible use of these type of devices.
The real only way to prevent the use of nuclear weapons is to eliminate them. Any use of nuclear weapon, anytime, anywhere, and in any context, would unleash a humanitarian catastrophe of epic proportions. And this is not hyperbole. This is the timeless message of the Ibakusha, the survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Nuclear sabers are again being rattled. This is madness. We must reverse course. First, nuclear weapon states must lead the way. I call on them to meet their disarmament obligations and commit to never use nuclear weapons under any circumstances. Second, we need to reinforce and recommit to the nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation regime built over the decades.
And TeleSUR English launches its own videos on demand site for you to go and revisit our interviews, top stories, and special broadcastings. Just go to the top left corner in our website homepage and click on the video option to access our VOD platform. We'll now take a final short break. Don't go away. Welcome back from the south. And 27 days after the military junta was installed to govern Gabon, the U.S. government announced the suspension of some of its aid to the African nation. Following the decisions of the Economic Community of Central American States, the African Union, and other groups, Washington announced the measure, which has no impact due to its limited scope. Moreover, Secretary of State Antony Blinken clarified that it is a temporary measure that does not affect diplomatic relations and consular operations with this oil-rich country after the overthrow of President Ali Bongo. South Sudan's military forces have been put on alert in view of the deployment of Ugandan troops on the borders with its territory. Rua Yakwan, spokesman for the South Sudanese forces, assured that the matter is being handled for the moment by the Joint Border Committee between the two parties, and that it will be up to them to recommend how to deal with the contingency. This Monday, the governor of the Bori region, Fanuel Dumo, denounced that the Ugandan troops installed tents as military bases in the province of Kaho-Keji. The regional official assured that the troops closed the border between both countries without giving explanations, provoking strong tensions among the residents of the area. Following the announcement that Mali's presidential election will be postponed, the reactions of locals in Bamako were mixed. Monday's announcement by the ruling junta that president elections originally scheduled for February 2024 will be delayed to a late date has led to some Malians to express their concern.
For us, each extension will always lead to another extension. We made an initial transition of 18 months. We were told that the problems will be solved and that we will go to the election. Then we were asked to give a little more time. We gave them another 24 months, and then we want to make another postponement for a later date. That is, we do not even know when the election will be held. So, for us, frankly, it is deplorable, because one of the principles of the Republic is the respect of our commitments. For us, we must be able to meet our commitments to our own people first, because we must recognize that the commitment was made for Malians first.
I think we'll do it another time. They will make every effort to be able to try again to solve these technical problems that have been listed and to be able to hold the elections. I think on another date. They even said they will make a communique. But the most important thing now is to be able to speak with the international community and partners and try to rely on arguments as powerful as that to be able to avoid possible problems and sanctions.
Thousands of Armenian refugees fled Nagorno-Karabakh on Tuesday as authorities in the war-torn breakaway state of Azerbaijan raised the death toll from a fuel explosion. Armenian Health Minister Anahit Avanesian announced Tuesday that a total of 125 people were killed in the explosion that occurred the day before in a gasoline depot near the town of Stepanakert in the Nagorno-Karabakh region, which resulted in a large fire. Most of the victims were refueling for the journey through the so-called Lashin corridor, which connects the impoverished and historically disputed region with Armenia. Iran's Islamic Revolution Guard successfully launched Noor 3 into orbit, the first satellite entirely made in the country. Noor, which in English means light, was put into orbit from the three-stage launcher cassette, or messenger in English, also of Persian manufacture. Thanks to the efforts of the specialists of the Air Space Force, the satellite already orbits at an altitude of 450 kilometers from the Earth. The Iranian Minister of Technology, Isa Sadehpour, congratulated the team of experts and all the Persian people. Some Western media report that the Iranian scientific feat generates anxiety in governments hostile to Tehran. We have come to the end of this news briefing, and you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social medias on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.